I am so excited to be here to talk to you about my journey as a functional medicine practitioner, as a registered dietitian, and how that intersects with cannabis, because there is a very big intersection. Remember, cannabis is a plant. So first let's talk about what does it mean to be a functional medicine practitioner? Well, that means I am looking at root cause resolution. I am bringing people on the way to optimal health, and I'm doing that by getting to the bottom of what ails them. And how do I do that? Well, we do that by peeling back the layers, sort of like an onion. I think of Shrek when I think of an onion, don't you? That just comes right into my mind. So we're peeling back this onion a little bit at a time. It's not a bandage approach. So somebody doesn't come to see me and say, oh, I have all of this GI distress. And I know a lot of you out there suffer from GI distress, whether it is reflux, diarrhea, constipation, overall bloating. This is like the number one reason why people come to see me. Probably the real number one reason is weight loss, but when you get and dig deep, before people can lose weight, they have to heal that GI distress. Now, what does it mean now to get to the root of the problem? The root of the problem really means getting down to the cellular level. You know, all that you hear about cells, and we have all of these cells in our body. Well, all of these cells have biochemical functions. And those biochemical functions are impacted by what? They are impacted by what we eat. What we eat is so crucial. It never ceases to amaze me that now, in this time, clearly, unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard of things like gluten-free, grain-free, dairy-free, paleo, there's all sorts of diets and food plans that people are following. Well, they're doing that for a reason. They're doing it for health. But what ultimately does it impact? It impacts the cells of our body, because that's where change must take place. And the change has to take place there first before you apply cannabis. So I don't want people to be using cannabis like a bandage approach. So my best example of that, because we can all relate to this, unfortunately, is insomnia. So it's very common that in an intake with me, and it often happens at the end of an intake, I find out that people have insomnia, but they don't really describe it that way. They would describe it as, well, I'm only sleeping, 5 hours a night, and I may get up 3 times. And I said, well, that's really a problem. You really don't have good health because of your sleep. And we can just fix your sleep, and a lot of these other symptoms that you have are going to go away. And they say, oh no, well, this has been my life forever. This is just how I am. And then I'll do some digging deeper. Remember, I'm peeling back that onion to see what they're doing in their life. And what do I find out? I find out that they're sleeping with the light on, or there's a light coming in from a street light. Okay, when that light comes in, it's hitting your cornea, and as soon as that light hits your cornea, your melatonin drops. Now, melatonin is the sleep hormone. You do not want your melatonin to drop while you're supposed to be in slumber. And any light does that, okay? The worst possible thing you can do is to sleep with your cell phone. Just turn that damn thing off, for God's sakes. We don't need to be attached to that cell phone all the time. You got to turn it off or put it in airplane mode. And you certainly shouldn't be looking at it in the middle of the night, because that blue light right on your cornea, you're going to be staying awake. Other things, okay? This is amazing to me. I see very, very smart people come to see me in my practice. They're what we call in New York stupid smart. And what do they tell me? Oh yeah, every day at about 4, I go downstairs and I have a quadruple espresso. Well, maybe that's not a good idea to have that at 4 o'clock, because maybe you're a slow caffeine metabolizer. So that's what we call getting to this cellular level. So you could do a test to determine if you're a slow caffeine metabolizer. That's something that can be revealed in your SNPs. These are single nucleotide polymorphisms. They're not aberrations. We all have them, and we have them for different reasons. So in other words, you may have a SNP that has to do with the amount of alcohol dehydrogenase you produce. So you know people who flush when they drink alcohol, or maybe can only have one drink and they're on the floor. Those people have a low amount of alcohol dehydrogenase, and that's determined genetically. So now we're getting deeper into cellular function. Those are those biochemical processes. And you know, how does this relate to cannabis? Well, in a big way. We can help to potentiate the action of cannabis by getting down to that cellular level and making our bodies open and receptive to cannabis in a bigger way. So to optimize its impact, because isn't that why you're here listening today? You want to find out about how cannabis works, but even more than that, how cannabis can work better for you. So let's talk about the standard American diet. Yes, that is a real acronym known as SAD, because the standard American diet is pretty damn sad. What is the standard American diet? Okay, processed foods, an insane number of processed foods, snacking, and even processed foods that are being eaten for dinner. You know, I don't need to name all the fast food restaurants that people go to. This is all processed foods that are high in trans fats, that are high in sugar, that are high in carbs. This does not make for the best cellular health. In fact, what the standard American diet does is it potentiates a very, very high level of oxidative stress. Okay? Oxidative stress at a high level is not our friend. This is not our friend at all. So let me talk to you a little bit about what is oxidative stress. What can we liken this to? Okay? Rust. Rust is oxidative stress. You've seen rust on metal on a car. An apple. Let's say you cut an apple and it turns brown. That's oxidative stress. Well, oxidative stress occurs in our bodies. Now, you need to have a little. You don't want to have zero oxidative stress, but oxidative stress is what we don't want. So what can help oxidative stress? An anti-inflammatory food plan is what we really need. So that would be the opposite of a standard American diet. So what does that mean? That essentially means no processed foods. And people freak out when I say that, but come on. Just get over that. Get over this addiction to processed foods and think more about, you know, what did your ancestors eat? I'm not talking about your ancestor cavemen. I'm talking about maybe your grandmother. Now, depending on how old you are, maybe it was your mother. Maybe it was your great-grandmother. But if I take a look and see what did my grandmother eat? So my grandparents on my mother's side are Italian, and they come from this teeny tiny little town called Laurito. I'm in fact named after the town because my name is Laura. And in Laurito, it's very close to where, if anybody knows about the 7-country study, this was Ansel Keys looked at this, and he looked at essentially these 7 countries all in the Mediterranean region. This is where the Mediterranean diet comes from. This is where my relatives live. I have cousins who are, one cousin in particular, she's 102 years old, completely cognitively intact. I don't think that we could say that about our American cousins. And what I do know is that the 4 brave people who got on that ship to come to Ellis Island from my family, 3 of them succumbed to chronic American disease. 1 of them did not. He clearly had the SNPs that protected him, because even though they were still eating a Mediterranean diet. My grandparents wanted to be American. That was the big deal back then. It wasn't like now. Now it's like let your freak flag fly. Wherever you're from, you can speak that language and people love it. Back then, I was discouraged from speaking Italian. So by the time I was 7, that was it. No longer speaking Italian. I understood it. My grandparents spoke it to me. I didn't speak it back. And they wanted to appear American. So they ate a lot of the American junk food. And so they succumbed, sadly, to, my grandmother died of ultimately colon cancer, my grandfather prostate cancer, my grandmother's sister died of Alzheimer's because 2 brothers married 2 sisters. How Italian of them. So, that anti-inflammatory food plan, that is full of vegetables. And when I say full of vegetables, I don't mean that one little side salad you get. I mean that is full of like 6 to 11 servings of vegetables. And especially what I like to refer to as detoxifying vegetables. So we're talking about anything in the cruciferous family. So those are the vegetables that smell when you cook them. They smell of sulfur because sulfur is very involved in our internal cytochrome P450 system, which is our detoxification system. So that means cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, cabbage. Those are the real detoxifiers. Then we have other things that detoxify. Lemon. A great way to start the day is with a fresh lemon, the juice of one fresh lemon. You want it to equal about 2 tablespoons in water. The water can be room temperature. It could be a little warm. I don't want it to be cold. Cold will disrupt your gastrointestinal milieu, so no cold beverages, no ice water. So that standard American diet is not going to it's not going to have a lot of corn in it, okay? No corn chips. It's not going to have a lot of potatoes or rice. It's going to primarily be shopping around the perimeter of the supermarket. What do you find there? That's where you find your vegetables. That's where you find your fruit. Now, I don't want people going out making smoothies. The problem with smoothies is when most people make smoothies, with the exception of Max Simon, who makes a fabulous smoothie every day, is they make smoothies that have a lot of fruit in them. And if you have a smoothie that has mango and pineapple and banana, basically you're getting 50 to 75 grams of sugar in a smoothie. That's not what we want. So if you're going to make a smoothie, you want it to lean on the side of the vegetables. But what I'm going to tell you is if you have any GI involvement, if you have the bloating, the diarrhea, you do not want to go any smoothies in the beginning because that will bloat you even further. You do want to have cooked vegetables in the beginning. What else on an anti-inflammatory food plan? Now, it's really individual for everyone, so it can get a little tricky. People hear that fish is great. Yeah, fish is great, but you better watch out what kind of fish you eat. You don't want fish that's going to be high in mercury or high in PCBs. And if you do have any sort of mercury poisoning or you're trying to detox, fish may not be the best idea. I am a proponent of people being carnivores. We're meant to be carnivores. Clearly, you don't want to go overboard. You want to be mindful. Definitely grass-fed beef for sure. And a little tip I'm going to give you: if a package says that it is has no GMOs, that doesn't mean it's organic, but organic does mean no GMOs. So, you want to be very mindful of that. When it comes to, let's say, what people think of as meat substitutes, beans, major no-no for people with GI distress. I think for obvious reasons, bloating, not going to work. But what we do want to look at is things like seeds. One seed that I recently discovered is white watermelon seeds. They are spectacular. And my personal favorite to add into salads, sprinkle on yogurt, and I'm going to talk to you about what kind of yogurt in a second, hemp seeds. Hemp seeds are really an excellent source of protein. They're an excellent flavor. Anybody I have introduced to hemp seeds has loved them. I have not had one single patient who didn't enjoy hemp seeds. So the yogurt that I like, because on an anti-inflammatory food plan, you got to nix the dairy, you got to nix the cow's milk dairy. We're talking about a coconut yogurt. Now there's a coconut, you don't want a coconut yogurt that contains guar gum or carrageenan, so you have to really look at the label for coconut yogurt. It's not high in protein, so adding the hemp seed is delish. You will thank me. So I want you to try that tomorrow. You're going to love it. So what other things can help us in potentiating the action of that cannabis? So I'm sure that you are aware, because you guys are the ones who are really committed to cannabis as a healing tool. So I'm sure you've heard of the endocannabinoid system. So that system, of course, is responsible for homeostasis in our body. So that means homeostasis happens at a lot of different levels. So we're talking about sleep. We're talking about mood. We're talking about memory. How can we help that homeostasis? Well, another thing is looking at organic food, because then we're not burdening the body, because ultimately what we're trying to do to heal is we are lowering our toxic load. We all have a toxic load. Did you ever ask the question, why are there more kids now with ADD and ADHD? Why are there more kids with autism? Why are there more kids with brain cancer? Well, part of that is because we are now generationally have moved down. If you know anything about Native Americans, everything they do is to maintain the land for 7 generations. Well, that 7th generation also has to do with us. So a lot of us are toxic, and we're passing along this toxic load and this toxic energy to our children. So what we need to be doing is lowering that toxic load. Food is the way we lower it. Selecting organic. You also can lower that toxic load by looking at the personal products that you're using, decreasing the amount of harmful ingredients. So that means that buying your personal products, at a local drugstore may not be the way to go. There's a great website you could go to, ewg.org, and they list, all of these harmful ingredients. Plus, you can plug in your product and get a number back. Easy way to start. You need to look at the cooking tools that you use. Stay away from Teflon. Also, how you store your foods. Are you storing your foods in plastic? Not a good idea. Go old school. Glass, ceramic. And these things are simple cleaning products. So generally, when I counsel people one-on-one, food is very personal. Food is more personal than personal products. So I generally can get people to switch out their personal products, their cleaning products, their cooking products, their storage products, before I can get them to change what they're eating. Because people are very attached to their food habits. But once they start seeing that they're feeling better, most of the time, people I work with, they don't even know that they could feel that good. And that's what you're going to find out. When you change what you're eating and you start lowering your toxic load to affect that cellular health, you will find that the cannabis you're using can work better, and also that you can use less. Because as you know, cannabis has a biphasic response, right? It's like makeup. Less is more. You can really have an effect, because if you start using too much, you're going to oversaturate those endocannabinoid receptors. So what are some other dietary things we can do to potentiate the action of cannabis? In my business, we'd call that up-regulating the endocannabinoid system. So number one, what you should know is that PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids are very important. And why? Because endocannabinoids are actually derived from arachidonic acid. That is a polyunsaturated fatty acid. So you know what that means? That means that we can produce our own endocannabinoids. If any of you are fans of the great Ethan Russo, you will know that he talks about something called endocannabinoid tone. And people who have a low endocannabinoid tone, we know them. We know them. You know them. You know those people who are a little bit unraveled, right? Or how about people, he talks about this, who have the comorbidities of Crohn's disease and migraine. His theory is those people have low endocannabinoid tone. Well, let me tell you, those people would do very well to really change what they're eating. They're not going to do super well with cannabis right off the bat. They must combine it with a different food plan. Probiotics. Okay, unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard about probiotics. Probiotics are what we can take orally to help the good bacteria in our body to work properly, because you know your gut is your second brain. So this is why we see this relationship between gut health and brain health. This is my sweet spot. This is what I work with patients on. They have to correct what's going on in the gut first to correct what's happening in the brain. So for those of you out there who have brain fog, you know who you are, who you can't find those words sometimes. You don't have early Alzheimer's. You have brain fog, and that can be corrected with food. And we want to start with the gut. You don't just apply probiotics. Again, you're not using a bandage approach. You want to change what you're eating. You can also, there are some foods that actually feed the probiotics, and those are called prebiotics. Artichoke, out here in California, this is where the artichokes are grown. And I believe this is the season for them. That's a great way to feed the probiotics in your system. Now, this is my big pet peeve when it comes to cannabis. All right. We all know about the ubiquitous pot brownie, right? I think there's not a college in America where a pot brownie isn't being made right now. But that pot brownie has, what in it? The most inflammatory food ingredient, perhaps, or the two most inflammatory, sugar and white flour. Come on, people. Do you actually think a pot brownie is what you should be eating for your medical condition? Come on. I think not. So let's think about it. Let's think about it. Should you be eating a high sugar product? Sugar is what feeds cancer cells. Do you know that when cancer cells are studied in vivo, meaning in a lab, what they put in that petri dish? Remember the petri dish from chemistry class? Or from biology? What they put in that petri dish is a glucose solution. That is sugar. To see which cells run over, those are the cancer cells. Is that a good idea? No. Okay? Let's move away from that. Let's move away from edibles with sugar in them. Now, speaking of edibles, I do want to mention that the fastest growing segment who is using cannabis are who? The baby boomers. And I'm not talking about the 55-year-old baby boomers. I'm talking about even the 75-year-old baby boomers. Because I think a couple of things happen. Number one, do you know your Aunt Sadie, who feels like she could say anything, right? She doesn't care what she says to people. Because why? When you get to be 75, you could say and do whatever you want. That's the way it is. So I think when people get to 75 or maybe 70, maybe younger, they say, whatever. I can't fall asleep at night. My knee is killing me. Why don't I have some cannabis? Now, they're not going to sit down and roll a joint. That's just not going to happen. Maybe they'll use a vaporizer, but really the best method for that population isn't edible. So you could get a very, very high quality chocolate. So I'm not talking, very high amount of cacao, because cacao is an anti-inflammatory. And you would have that person, you would use that to melt in your mouth. And of course, you know about start slow, go low, or is it the other way around? So that you want to start with a very small amount of THC to find your sweet spot. That is a great thing for insomnia, for pain, for that particular population. Fat. Fat is, of course, fat is our friend. Long gone is the day where we're trying to have, snack wells and a low-fat diet. We know that fat is what gives us satiety. What is satiety? Satiety gives us that feeling of fullness. That's what keeps us full. But fat is also very important for a couple of other reasons. Have any of you heard about the ketogenic diet? So the ketogenic diet is primarily high in good fats, so not processed food. So we're talking about things like medium chain triglycerides, which are in coconut oil, olive oil, avocado, very, very functional fats, and super low carb. A ketogenic diet is about 20 grams of carbs. And what we see is that children with seizure disorders can completely get rid of their seizures on that type of a food plan. That is what I did with my daughter. Her seizures gone. Ketogenic diet is also helpful for many, many different health conditions. Things like MS, Parkinson's, weight loss. So very, very, very helpful. So for any of you who have health conditions like that, anything in the neurodegenerative category, ketogenic diet is just incredible. And here's something interesting that I'm sure many of you already know. Cannabis works better in a fat milieu. So, when you're using cannabis, you really want to have it with some fat. So that's why you'll see a lot of the oils are in an oil preparation. They're not in an alcohol base. So they're in either usually a coconut oil, so that is that MCT oil, that's called the medium chain triglyceride, or in an olive oil. And of course, in an edible, the edibles that really have a better action are those that have some fat in them. So rather than a candy, which is high in sugar, more like a high cacao value chocolate that you can melt in your mouth, or seeds or nuts that have been really, really, really work well. Now, I'm going to also talk about something which is really interesting with cannabis, and that is caffeine. So there are some manufacturers out there who are combining caffeine with cannabis, and I believe in Washington State there is actually a cafe that is serving cannabis with coffee. So caffeine actually promotes the uptake of THC. So where a lot of us think of, caffeine, of course, as helping to keep us awake, and there are certain cultivars of cannabis that are going to make us a little sleepy, caffeine is a very nice combination with cannabis for certain people. Very nice combination. Alcohol, alcohol changes the pH. Well, everything changes the pH of your system. Alcohol can potentiate a little too much, so you really have to be careful with alcohol. And let me tell you, if you have GI distress, you shouldn't be drinking alcohol. I don't care if you're using, I have women in New York. I have all these high-powered women who come to see me. And, they're burning the candle at both ends. They're raising kids. They have some high-powered job. And to de-stress, they go home and drink a bottle of white wine. They think white wine is better for some reason. I do not know why. White wine is loaded with sugar. Loaded. If you're going to drink wine, go for the red, higher in polyphenols. But let me tell you, if you have GI distress, knock off the alcohol, okay? I try to make some deals with people Do this, stay with me for 3 weeks. Come on, what's 3 weeks out of your life? I'm going to coach you for 3 weeks, and we're going to see how you feel. And I'm going to have you fill out a very long form that gives me all your symptoms, because you know what happens if people don't fill out the form? They come back to me and they say, I'm the same. And I look at that form and I say, wait a minute. Okay, do you still have that, that eczema on your elbow? And I could see the eczema is gone. They're like, oh, yeah, that's gone. Do you still have a headache? No, that headache's gone. Because guess what? When we feel well, we don't realize it. So think about it. Like if you're like me, if you're a mother, you only notice when your kids do the bad things. And then they tell you, oh, no, no, you're supposed to tell them when they do the good things. So I have to remember that. It's the same with how we feel. We only recognize when we feel badly. What is up with that? We have to be more positive. Flavonoids. So I did mention, the red wine flavonoid, but that doesn't mean you have to get it that way. Vegetables are full of flavonoids. Genistein, that is in green tea. Matcha. How about if you can drink a smoothie, adding some matcha to your smoothie with maybe some turmeric, curcumin? That is the bomb in a flavonoid. Add that with cannabis. You are going to be doing yourself a major solid. Now, if anybody's familiar with kava, that's like big in Hawaii. Kava is very interesting. And there's something in kava called kava lactone that has a great impact with cannabis. And there's another category of herbs called adaptogenic herbs. So I'm going to tell you where that name comes from. So let's think Nepal. So on the side of a mountain in Nepal, the weather varies drastically. It can go from blazingly hot to flash flood to below freezing in a day. But yet, plants grow there. It seems very inhospitable, right? Well, what the indigenous cultures discovered was that those plants actually confer health benefit. And what health benefit do they confer? Homeostasis, just like cannabis. So those plants impact the endocannabinoid system. Imagine putting those two things together. Really can impact it in a very, very, very significant way. So we're talking about things like rhodiola, magnolia bark, ashwagandha. These are incredibly powerful herbs. I'm going to tell you, if you're going to use these herbs, I really do want you to work with a healthcare professional, because you want to make sure that you're getting the right herbs. But what I will tell you is that overall, these herbs adapt to your level of homeostasis. So you can use them no matter how you're feeling. So in general, they're not dangerous, but you have to watch out if you're taking any medication, because there can be interactions. So you don't need to do it on your own. So we talked about a lot today. This was like the quick version of nutrition counseling. So what did I tell you? Number one, nutrition is vital for cellular health. Without cellular health, you cannot have optimal wellness. And I know that's what you want. So you really have to look at an anti-inflammatory food plan to combine with cannabis, whether it's with or without THC. Look at lifestyle factors that can also upregulate the endocannabinoid system. Meditation, sleep, good sex, all of these things impact us. That is what holistic living is all about. Thank you.